Treksploration.
I don't want to take up any more of the time because this is really going to be an extraordinary panel. They haven't been together on stage in a long time. They have amazing stories, and I'm going to turn it over to the hosts of Star Trek: The Next Conversation, the great Matt, Mira, and Andy Secunda. Come on out, guys, and take us on a voyage.
At the Academy who warned you about Ferengi. You know, I think memento for my parents would be a great idea. Oh, no.
Whoa, Voyager spot. Hi, everybody. Hello. Welcome to, where do I sit? Are we just in the couch center like weirdos?
We're at first, so
we're not the people people want to see. This is hard. I'm gonna go over here. Secunda! Flank 'em. Okay, hi. Good to be here. I'm Matt Mira, that's Andy Secunda. We're gonna do this nice and quick. We're gonna start this off, and here we're a little behind, so we'll pick up the pace. We're gonna talk Voyager, we're gonna talk some writers. We're familiar with all of them, we love them dearly. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Mike Sussman, Lisa Klink, Andre Bormanis, and later, Brannon Braga. Yeah, there we go. There's Mike. Hello, Mike. I didn't know where to really sit. I don't know. Coordinate with the microphone.
To me?
With the
yes.
Hello, Andre. Hello. Matt, nice to meet you.
Doing great. Hi,
Lisa, welcome. Thank you.
Hello. Did you want to sit on the other side? We can box
flank them. They won't know where to look.
Create as much confusion as possible for you guys.
Well, first things first. Andy and I were discussing, we drove here together. We were carpooling. We care about the environment. And me not falling asleep, so thank you.
That was my main job.
We were talking, we were like, oh, what's a good in? Like, we're TV writers, we should know the right questions to ask. Turns out we might not. But I just wanted to see how each of you got your job on Star Trek Voyager, specifically. So we'll start with Lisa. She was an intern on DS9. Then what happened?
Spoiler alert. Yes, I was a Writers Guild intern on Deep Space Nine, but I also got in the door by submitting a Next Generation spec, because at the time, Star Trek would read any spec script that you sent in. Sadly, they do not do that anymore, so don't start writing. But I sent in a spec and I got invited into pitch at Deep Space Nine. So I went in and pitched several times, and then I also got the Writers Guild internship, which gave me obviously great insight into what kind of stories they were looking for and stuff like that. And so I pitched an episode that eventually became Hippocratic Oath. And at the time, Voyager was just getting started. So Ira Stephen Bear sent my Hippocratic Oath over to Jerry Taylor and said, if you're looking for a staff writer, check her out. And they did, and they hired me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a fantastic, that's how it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
In the times of writing. Andre, how did you end up on Voyager?
Well, I was hired in May of 1993 to be the science consultant on the final season of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Wow.
Also the second season of Deep Space Nine. That in and of itself is a long story. Getting that job and working on the show and writing up technical notes on the various scripts, talking to the writers about science ideas and their stories and so forth, eventually gave me the opportunity to pitch. And Jerry Taylor, who was the showrunner for Voyager in the early years, wonderful person. She's the one who basically hired me to be the science consultant. She was my first interview there. And she said, anytime you want to come in to pitch, because I told her, yeah, I got a few story ideas. And so, I was working on Voyager as their science consultant. They liked what I did enough the first year I was there to keep me on for Voyager.
So you're like, at the time, you're like, hey, I want to do this thing. What do I need? Tachyon bursts or what?
Exactly.
That's you? Okay.
Exactly.
That's good to know.
You can't fire the phasers when the deflector shields are up. And so I would pitch to Jerry periodically.
Brannon Braga, everybody. Brannon, I'm going to go ahead and slide in there. Brannon Braga, everybody. He's got gotta say his hellos, sorry he's late, it's not his fault, the times changed a couple times.
Sorry, Mike.
So you're in the midst of, Brandon, we are currently going through how did you get your job on Star Trek Voyager specifically? And Andre was just telling us about his time as a free pitch and science consultant. It sounds crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah, so, every few months I would go in and pitch some stories to Jerry, and, occasionally she would run one up the flagpole, and Michael Piller would say, yeah, I don't think we're going to do that, or that's not for us. And eventually they bought one, and then a month later they bought another one, and they were shorthanded, I think, on the writing staff in the third season, and they had a story that was sold by a couple of writers who were not on staff, and they had no one apparently available to write the teleplay. So Jerry called me and she said, hey, we've got a story, but nobody to write the script. Would you like to write the first draft? And I'm like, sure. Wow. And then they liked that enough to have me do another one. So,
Fantastic.
I was the science consultant on Voyager for its whole run, and I think I wrote or co-wrote 6 or 7 episodes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's not every day a science guy gets to be creative enough to actually write television. Good job.
Thank you.
I'm very proud of you.
Appreciate that.
Well, you did it wasn't to impress Matt.
Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I also started as a WGA intern, and I remember I landed in LA and I wanted to write for Star Trek. That was kind of that was my career plan basically. I called Paramount and they said, no, you can't come over and pitch stories. So I ended up getting a job in the Paramount lot, and I'd go over to the commissary every day around 3 o'clock when it closed. And that's when the assistants on Star Trek were over there getting like little snacks. And I found out about the internship program and applied, and like a year later, I got to do it. It was amazing. It was like 6 weeks. It was like going to school all over again. Sitting in the room with Brannon and Jerry Taylor and so many other people. And on the last day of my internship, I pitched a story to Michael Piller, and I remember he just kind of paused, and I thought for sure he was just going to kick me out of the room and say, well, it's nice being here all this time, I'll see you later. And he said I'd never heard a story like that before, and he bought it. He ended up writing it. It was a season 2 episode called Meld, which turned out pretty well. Michael did a great job of that, and that was how I started.
Fantastic. Now, Brandon, you were already in the system, I hear, of Star Trek to get. So, how'd you wind up specifically on Voyager?
Well, I was just wrapping up the final season of Next Generation, and there was really nowhere else to go.
Sure.
Deep Space Nine was full, and Voyager was starting up, and I liked it. I mean, it was great being part of something from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of migrated over there.
It was a unique feeling for you because you had been with TNG since after it had already started. So to be in the room and to start to develop this new series, did you see anything in Voyager that you were like, let's not go this way because on TNG it was a little
There was nothing blah about TNG.
Right.
I think the show was sensational.
Oh, it's a snooze fest.
However,
no,
I'm
kidding.
The promise and the curse of Voyager was we were going to be catapulted to a new part of the galaxy, and we could not rely on any of the usual suspects.
Yeah.
Villains, Federation, any of that stuff. That was the cool part.
Right.
The not cool part was, what in God's name are we going to do?
Sure.
We have to make up new aliens every week, new situations. We were still kind of stuck in the hour-long episodic model, which made it feel a little similar.
Yeah.
So we were trying to find our own footing. We had this Maquis thing going on that didn't last very long.
Right.
Because you realize once you're stranded on a desert island for the rest of your life, are you going to bicker about politics or find coconuts, basically? And so that didn't. So we were really trying to find our identity, right?
Did you find that like the idea of I mean, there were a couple times in the earlier run of Voyager where you suddenly are like, oh, there's a Romulan. Oh, here's a Ferengi. Oh, here's other Alpha Quadrant things. Did you try consciously to let's really wait until we pull the trigger on that?
Did we have a Ferengi on Voyager?
Yeah, we did.
All of it is in retrospect. What kind of laziness were we into? Why a Ferengi? And a Romulan?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah.
What episode?
What episode?
False Prophets is the Ferengi episode.
Oh, you know what though?
There
That
was
was
a
a
sequel.
good episode though.
Yeah.
Oh, no one's saying that. Yeah.
I actually really liked that episode. Yeah. Okay.
And there was
Back and forth.
There was a rationale for it.
Yeah.
As Brannon says, the whole idea behind Voyager was we're going to be in a whole new region of space, new aliens, new spatial phenomena, whatever that might be. But of course, that's a challenge, especially after you've done, 7 seasons of Next Gen and 1 or 2 seasons at that point of DS9.
Yeah.
And yeah, you do want to also revisit some of those stories that maybe you wanted to do about a Klingon or a Ferengi or this or that or the other that you hadn't had a chance to do on,
Right.
say, Next Gen.
Well, the other kind of opportunity and curse of Voyager is that we're heading in one direction very fast. And so when we would encounter an alien, we would move out of their space pretty quickly. And so we couldn't really have recurring aliens very often until we hit the Borg, who were pretty much everywhere. But, so even if we came up with a cool villain like the Medians, there was only so long that we could rationally be in their territory.
Right. It always seemed like Neelix knew a lot for a long distance. A little too. I was like, we really still know this Delta Quadrant 4 years in? You're still familiar? That's odd. I think the beauty of Voyager though is it's sort of isolation away from Starfleet. Like you always have the feeling of when you're watching it of like, oh, these people really, there's no backup they can call in. There's no fleet. And to have like Janeway as such I love that she was the science officer, first of all, of her old ship. So that it always seemed like she was the problem solver on Voyager in a way that I think is unique to Voyager, because she's the only one who has been a science officer.
But that does also raise a question that's come up between Matt and I a lot, which is, it seems like on Voyager, and I wonder if this is conscious or if it was just kind of, we know everybody seems to be very adept science-wise, everybody seems to be adept sort of engineering-wise. Was it sort of a thought that it's like, these people are all experts, you can throw the ball to whoever, or was it?
No, B'Elanna Torres was the engineer.
For sure.
And I don't think Harry Kim could do her job, and I don't think she could do his job. Everybody had their expertise. I think that Janeway was a scientist.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I always thought part of her bond with Tuvok was that he was kind of a science guy too,
Well, they all went to Starfleet Academy, and so they all would have had
Right.
the basics in, like temporal mechanics and engineering and, kind of 101 knowledge.
Well, yeah, it's a little like present-day astronauts, They come from various backgrounds. Some are pilots, some are doctors, some are this, that, or the other. But, they all have a certain level of technical skill by virtue of the fact that they may be called upon in an emergency to bring the space shuttle back home back in the day, or to bring, Starliner, which is still attached to the space station and has been for 2 months. We'll hope they get that back home. But
I'm gonna call you soon.
I hope so. I've been waiting. Sit by the phone.
Was there anything I know, Brandon, you were there the longest, but was there anything that you really wanted to do that you never got to do with Voyager?
Well, we pretty much left, I think I speak for everyone when I say we left every story we left nothing on the table.
Yeah.
You had 26 episodes, you had no choice, right?
But, we've talked about this before. The two-parter Year of Hell was initially pitched as a season-long storyline, and that lasted for about 0.2 seconds before it was rejected. I knew it was going to get rejected. right away. And we pitched, I think I pitched that at the very beginning of that season. Was that 3 or 4? I can't remember.
3.
3.
Yeah.
And so it would have been cool to
Yeah.
make that a whole seasonal, deterioration and see what happened, but it was a good 2-parter.
You're playing in a it was a great 2-part. It was a good 2-part. It was a great 2-parter. And I think it's an interesting thought to go, to see who you could have lost along the way. You would have these moments, the ship's falling apart, the crew's dying off. I do wonder if the Star Trek audience at that time was ready for that.
Well, the studio certainly didn't think so.
Yeah.
Because they were selling the show into syndication, and serialization typically doesn't work in syndication. I've wondered why the show 24 isn't showing somewhere in syndication. I think it's a hard,
Right.
you can't just jump in like Friends.
But meanwhile, you'll have Suits will be the #1 show on Netflix still for some reason. It's what is happening?
See, you can binge all of those.
Right.
Back in the old days, you had to watch things week to week. You had no control.
Right. Well, now it's interesting to think of now. Or you guys have seen television going the way it is now, where you suddenly have access to everything you ever wanted, and you can start. I can start with Voyager right now, and I can finish it tomorrow. The idea of that. It seems like no one had the forethought to really envision that television would end up there. And we all agree. Thanks, everybody.
Technology moves on. Andre, I'm curious, because I assume most of your job when you were just a science consultant was people approaching you and saying, hey, this is what we want to do. Is there a way? Was there anything where you sort of said, there is this phenomena, this thing, and then from that it spun into the story?
I don't know about spinning into the story. Sometimes, writers would call me, telling me, oh, we've got an element in this story. I remember David Weddle and Bradley Thompson, who wrote for DS9, said, oh, we're doing this story about the Bajorans, and there's a comet that comes into the star system, and the Bajorans have all of these prophecies about comets, and David and Bradley were like, well, kind of know what a comet is, and kind of know, they have the tail, but, when does the tail form, and how fast do they move? What are they made out of? So I just, spent an hour talking to them on the phone about comets, and then they worked that into the script, and then I filled in any little blanks they left. And another time, I remember Lisa was working on a story. It was a very good episode, Scientific Method, on Voyager. And the premise of the story was that this more advanced alien race, if I remember this correctly, was kind of doing an experiment on the Voyager crew, treating us like lab rats, and we had no idea that was happening to us, at least not at the beginning. Strange things are going on, but we don't know why. And Lisa thought, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if Janeway, the astrophysicist, was also doing something scientific? And I think your question to me was something to the effect of, is there any kind of an astronomical phenomenon we've not seen on the show that if Voyager came across it, Janeway as an astronomer would say, oh, we got to go investigate this?
Well, I remember also asking, is there such a phenomenon that it looks like it would be totally impossible to deal with? If we went near it, that we would all get destroyed.
Yes, right, that was the other part of it.
Because she ends up playing chicken, basically, with
Yes.
the aliens.
That's right.
And so, Andre gave me a great solution.
Well, I've been reading about a relatively recent discovery, this is back in the mid-90s, that is now, something we know a lot about and made a lot of observations of. Binary neutron stars. Neutron stars are the collapsed cores of big stars. They're big dense ball of neutrons. They're only 7 or 8 miles in diameter. And they generate radio waves and magnetic fields. Sometimes they orbit each other. They end up in pairs. And because of the fact that they will radiate away gravitational energy, they will eventually collide and form a black hole, which would be a great thing to observe from a distance, but really bad if you're anywhere really near that. And so binary pulsar, because these things send up pulses of light, and Lisa thought, oh, that sounds perfect. And to make sure that we got the mechanics right, I got in touch with an astronomer at Caltech named Shri Kulkarni, who had studied this phenomenon, and he gave us all the technical details for Rick Sternbach to do the outwork and the VFX. It was great. It looked fantastic. And I suspect nobody had ever really on a 1-hour network, or drama had ever heard about binary pulsars. So I felt very proud about that.
I mean, the effects stand up, I think, on a lot of Voyager, because they were early on the digital front, like having a digital version of Voyager versus the model. I mean, they had a model, obviously, but later in the run, and also Enterprise, too, it's remarkable how some of those effects really, really hold up well, and how some of them are like...
Some are terrible.
Yeah, some are like, whoa, okay.
But they're charming.
There is charm.
Did you say charming? Charming, yeah. Yeah, we did, you're right, we did start with models and transition to digital. I don't remember when that happened exactly.
Yeah.
And then Enterprise was the first all-digital hero ship.
No model of that was built. It's fascinating too, because like, in many ways it feels like the most physically tangible of all the ships.
And then on the show, Andre and I work on the Orville, we decided to shoot with models again, because it would be so cool. And that didn't last long. Because the models they're gorgeous, but they don't hold up to the high-def detail the way they used to. Although, when they upgraded Next Gen, I was really pleasantly surprised to see how beautiful the model work was.
Yeah.
A lot of that ILM stuff they did for the first couple of seasons, like there's nothing that looks better than that stuff. It's interesting too when you watch a show like Voyager. I mean, like I guess you watch Star Trek in and of itself, how much of space in and of itself is a character. I feel like it's like a companion along the ride of, we're all on this fun little adventure. Going home, I don't know how fun going home is, but when you're 80 years away from home, you always have this thing of space and being in the Delta Quadrant as opposed to the Alpha Quadrant. Did you do anything, Andre, that was like, maybe this is like less rooted in fact because it was the Delta Quadrant, where you're just like, we'll let that slide?
I don't recall anything particularly, more, this couldn't happen in our part of the galaxy like we did in the Delta Quadrant because we're over there.
But Andre, and I only say this because I'm responsible for fluidic space. What is right?
I totally forgot about
not
fluidic
real.
space.
It's
BC's
completely made up.
Yeah.
And because when you're in other dimensions,
yes,
all bets are off.
True.
So there was some wacky doodle stuff.
There were, but I would argue that you could probably have fluidic space in the Alpha Quadrant. I mean, why not?
What makes Andre, what's so great about Andre is that he is a scientist and as a science consultant, but he's also a writer, so he understands when to sign off on things, even if they're suspect.
Well, that brings me up to the sort of next angle. Andy and I, who do this podcast together, we met writing on a television show. We met writing on the Goldbergs on ABC, and it was one of the...
No applause, that's all right.
10 seasons, we were doing 22 to 24 episodes a season. We were the last of the dinosaurs.
Not 26, though.
You guys, like the idea of doing 26 a season.
It's insane.
Follow that up with their hour long, right?
Yeah.
Did you...
And we're told backstage you guys had about 7 or 8 writers? And we had
we got to 17. By
By
season 7, there were 17 writers on that show.
We had I think write what you're looking minus Jerry at one point. It was, we only had 4 or 5 at a time.
This is so crazy to me.
It was a living hell.
Is that where Year of Hell came from?
Yes.
I mean, it must have been in the sense of you're writing, you're pumping out episodes. When did you guys? So when did hiatus start? Let's say
we had 2 weeks off.
Jesus Christ!
And if anyone wanted more than 2 weeks, they had to ask. We literally would finish the season. We'd have 2. Am I right? We'd have 2 weeks off, and then we'd come back.
Oh my God.
We'd be given, I don't know, 10 weeks run-up production, and whatever we could get, how many scripts we could bank in time, we would. And maybe we'd get 3 or 4, and then shooting would start, and those would get gobbled up, and then you're just trying to
feed the beast. You got to feed the beast.
Right, and we never shut down on any of the shows that we worked on.
That is a badge of honor.
What's that?
That is a badge of honor to not have shut down.
Well, it's the worst nightmare is shutting down because you run out of scripts. I mean,
Sure.
it's shameful.
Yeah.
But, and that's, you know, I'm not making excuses for the episodes that didn't work out. We always tried to make a great episode.
Oh, I always think
Sometimes they don't always work out.
no one sets out to sit down at the desk and write bad television. Like, it's not our goal, ever. Like, but it is, when you're in the machine, sometimes stuff's gonna get a little less attention. But on our show, it's a half-hour comedy, so there was always a writer on set, and there was always the writer of the episode also was on set. And I was talking to Mike and Lisa before, and you guys didn't go to set very much?
We had no time.
Yeah.
I mean, we
just needed every hand.
If I can't speak for you guys, but if I was on set, there was a problem. There was some issue to be dealt with. We just didn't have time to go to the set.
And did you just rely on, like, just watching assemblies as they came in? Like, how would you know if the show was any?
Oh, well, we watched dailies and we watched cuts, and yeah, of course, we had to see that, and we were involved in casting, pre-production, in a very heavy way.
Yeah.
When you moved into showrunner, how hands-on were you on the editing?
The editing was really, we had a team of editors, and Rick Berman, that was his purview.
Gotcha.
The non-writing producer, very good.
Having said that, I did spend quite a bit of time in the editing room. Usually, when I would get a call from Rick's office to come to the cutting room, and I knew something was crappy, and he was going to show it to me and say, "What were you guys thinking?"
That doesn't add more pressure.
What were you guys thinking? Well, you know what we were thinking. It was on the page. We weren't on set because we were writing more of these.
But we didn't do a lot of reshooting. We didn't really have that luxury.
That actually brings up another question that we had. This may just be, that's the way things happen when you're trying to crank out that much material. But Matt and I have kind of noticed a pattern, also when looking at behind the scenes information, that like, sometimes there'll be a scene that's kind of just a downbeat, kind of, it's like, oh, this is a wonderful scene, I love these characters. This seems almost like this was a little like written... Filler, thank you, didn't want to say it. So always delightful, but it feels like maybe there's a lot of them in this series, and I wondered if budgetarily you guys were writing short, or you discovered you were short, or you edited down.
And we broke every story scene for scene.
Yeah,
very, very carefully, and which is one of the only ways that you can. You know, sometimes we didn't give those beat sheets, we called them, to production, to prep, if the script wasn't ready. So it was just TV was a little different. It was a little slower paced, it took its time, and we had these characters. We didn't have a lot of money for visual effects, so you have these actors in these sets, and you gotta, you know.
Did we ever run short? Did we ever cut together a show and realize, oh my God, we're 3 minutes short? I don't recall.
Just to clarify my question, it seems like sometimes it said this was shot later because you discovered you were short.
I don't think that happened very often.
Okay.
I don't.
But on Enterprise, for sure.
Did Enterprise run short sometimes?
It did.
I mean, David Livingston did our Borg episode, and I remember he came in 10 minutes short, and we had to write 10 minutes worth of new material, which actually ended up being like really great character stuff.
Yeah.
So,
It always seems to be character stuff.
well, you have to really
You
dig
got to
into
shoot on a standing set,
Yeah.
technically, at that point, right?
the new sets you built for that episode are gone, and the guest cast has been dismissed.
Right.
So you got 10 minutes to fill. You can only use your existing cast members, standing sets, go. And it's got to be good and fit into the story you've already written.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a great challenge, and you want to, blow your brains out when you first get that call. But some of those scenes end up being like the best ones in the episode.
Yeah.
There was I wasn't working on the show at the time, but there was an episode called Dive with Tom Paris, where he was like thrown in the brig or something for disobeying Janeway's orders, and remember the ship went underwater or something to that effect.
I think that was 30 days.
Was that 30 days?
I think so.
Oh, okay. But I heard...
Guys, was it?
Stand corrected. But I heard the whole raft about Paris being in jail was all added after the fact, because the episode came in short, and that ended up...
Holy shit.
That's not true.
Uh-oh.
This is
Well,
good. That's why Brandon's here.
It's not a good episode. Actually, Mike, I might be wrong, but what is it without that? I mean, what's the story? They go underwater. Was that the one where Voyager was underwater? It can't be.
No, Voyager wasn't, but we were dealing with a race of aliens and they were underwater and Tom Paris had some obsession with like ships or something, and so
Yeah.
Did you take
disobeyed
fire
orders and
orders?
took one of their ships, and, yeah.
Well, you might be right, Mike.
It was a long time ago, actually.
It's okay. It's a lot of episodes. And it's a lot, 26 years, it's insane.
But thank goodness though, because that's why, you know, people like Lisa and me, there was no Pandora policy, because when I got there, and I think the same is true for Lisa, there were 2 Star Trek shows going on at the same time, producing 52 hours every year.
Amazing.
So they needed story, and if you came in and had a decent idea, you could sell it, and it was like nothing that exists right now.
We had a staff. Enough cannot be said about the actors and the production team, because they were doing it too.
Yeah.
And we were proficient at breaking and writing scripts, but it was all about the mining for gold of the story.
Yeah.
That was the hardest thing, finding a concept that was a cool science fiction concept, with a strong character component, and some kind of theme that was intriguing.
Yeah.
And you didn't always get all 3.
But when
What
you
did
do,
you-
it's safe. It's sort of like, this is what I love science fiction for. It's sort of the lesson too, I think, is important.
Brandon, I just out of curiosity, because you're sort of touching on it, and the sort of pillars of what you're looking for. When you would sit down and you guys would maybe anyone can answer this. When you're sitting in the room and you're brainstorming, where does it usually come from first? Like, do you come in with like thinking something maybe on this topical theme, on this historical theme?
Is it, do we need a Janeway episode, or is it that kind of a thing?
I mean,
Where do you get your crazy ideas? Is my question.
I think it was rare that we started with a theme. You know, that was something we would uncover.
Kind of back into.
I can't. You guys should answer this question too. For me, it usually started with a science fiction concept. Some of my episodes are shallow, but they have a cool idea driving them. You know,
Right.
That's how I would usually do it. An image or a quantum physics concept or something that would drive an interesting story structurally is how I would usually start. What about you, Liz?
Yeah, we usually start with plot. You know, with what is the, what's going to be the log line.
Yeah.
Of this episode, and then we would usually assign it to a character. Either it's time to do a Milan episode, or more likely we would say, well, which character would respond the most to this story? Which character would it really illuminate? But I think you're right. I think it started mostly with what's it about?
I can give you one very specific example that I remember very clearly, and it might have been my first sale to Voyager, actually. I read a review in Scientific American of a book called Descartes' Error, written by a neuroscientist. And it talked about how this whole Cartesian duality, this idea that we have the logical part of our brain and the emotional part of our brain, and they're separate and they process information differently, that's completely wrong. There's a lot of sort of cross circuitry. And they talked about a case where a guy had suffered a really bad head trauma, like a car accident. And he could talk, he was fine. He seemed like, fairly together after this accident. He didn't have any trouble speaking, he had his vocabulary. The doctor, examined him a few times, did some tests, and he said, I want you to come back next week. We gotta do an MRI or whatever. I can see you on Tuesday or Thursday. The guy spent the next half an hour debating, in his own mind and speaking out loud whether he should come Tuesday or Thursday. Well, Tuesday there's a chance of rain and the roads will be slick, and that increases the probability that it might be an accident. And Thursday, and the doctor just let him go on and on and on because this is fascinating. And what had happened is, when we make decisions on a daily basis on something like that, something relatively trivial, we don't spend a lot of time thinking through all the details. We make a gut decision, right? And it is literally the part of the brain that's involved with the gut and everything else, right? And I thought, oh, this is a perfect story for Tuvok. Tuvok, we'll find out, has been cut off from his emotional core. Now, Vulcans, they are very logical and they don't show emotion, but they have emotions. They keep them repressed. And at first, Tuvok is like, hey, he suffers an accident, he's shot by an alien, whatever. He has no more emotional core, he's reached Kolinar, right? But what we discover is he can't be a functioning member of the bridge crew because he can't make a decision to save his life. Everything he has to talk through every logical possibility. So he has to go through the painful process of reintegrating his emotional core. You know, I came up with that in 2 minutes after reading this article.
We did not sit around the writer's room talking about Cartesian dualities. I'm listening with...
I remember at least one time.
I'm listening with fascination here.
Yeah, but... anyway, that's...
No, I mean...
But again, to Lisa's point, it's a great story about a particular character, and you see what the stakes are for that character right away, but it's also an interesting science fiction concept.
Right. Did you? What time would you get in the morning? Just walk me through this day. Your average day as a Star Trek writer. Is it 10 o'clock? You're rolling to Paramount.
Also, if you want to address within that question, Lisa and Mike were commenting backstage. The hours were maybe a little bit rougher before you took over, Brannon. So if you want to have a perspective on that.
I thought we were a 9 to 5.
I think maybe what he's referring to is whether or not, if you were on a script, whether or not you still had to be in the writer's room every day.
Oh, if you were on a script, you had a free pass, right? You didn't have to be in the writer's room.
Not at first.
Huh? I blocked it out. You guys answered the question. So you had such a small staff.
Well, Jerry was kind of an early bird, wasn't she?
You know what? You're right. That was Jerry's fault. Yeah.
I was just looking to assign blame. That's why we were asking these questions.
You're right. We had a very small staff, and Jerry Taylor wanted all hands on deck for all the story breaks. You're right.
So as soon as you broke the story and went off with the beat sheet, how long did you have before you had to bring in the draft?
About 2 weeks.
Well, in the beginning of the season, we would have about 2 weeks. And then as production got closer and closer and closer, and we had less and less time to write it, I think I wrote a script in 3 days.
Oh my God.
You know, toward the end
Plenty of time, Lisa.
Which is plenty of time.
You can do the beginning, middle, and end. Each one is per day.
Exactly.
Working out the story.
20 pages a day. What's the big deal?
We're gotta come up with the filler scenes. It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but working out the story was, in my mind, generally more work. Because coming up with an original story after you've done, 140 or 150 episodes of Next Gen and all those episodes of DS9 and everything else that was going on, it's like, what have we not done? And sometimes we'd be in the room thinking, oh, this would be great, this would be awesome. Somebody was, wasn't that
amazing how we never repeated anything ever.
But actually, sometimes you would realize, oh, that was episode 97 of Next Gen. We probably shouldn't do that, or we should really change it.
I did have a question on that. And who's around by the finale? Brannon, you worked on the finale, right? Of the Voyager.
I contributed to
You sort of had a hand in it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe this is a question that doesn't apply to any of you, but there's
a better question for
I was there.
Oh, okay, great. So I'm just curious about the discussion in the writers' room. It's obviously it's time jumping and trying to change the course of history. And there's the timeless episode where Harry does kind of a similar thing, and then there's Year of Hell where it's on the other side. The Krenim are trying to change history to sort of save also his wife, the villain's wife. And it's interesting to me that there's on one side, he's presented as the villain, and then on the other side, Janeway is kind of like a little bit of a renegade doing this, but just sort of we're on her side. She's trying to save, these important characters that we love. So I was curious if that was a discussion or if it was just like, we got to move forward. This is a great idea. We're doing this.
I told them all those things, and they said they were doing it anyways.
I don't know if anybody remembers.
I was out in the writer's room. I was doing the science consulting stuff, so I was rarely in the writer's room during Voyager other than my own stories that were being broken in or whatever.
Gotcha.
The finale of Voyager, if I remember, was written by Ken Miller and somebody else. And it was kind of like a black box. I think they just kind of went off and wrote it with Rick.
Make sure you hold the mic.
Wrote this amazing finale, and the rest of us were, either trying to get a job on Enterprise or finishing up our work.
You're a little distracted. Well,
So like,
fantastic
is
finale.
it bittersweet for you, like wrapping up Voyager as you're going into your own, into Enterprise? Like,
I mean, I wasn't there really for season 7. Ken Miller was running it at that point. So,
Although Brannon and I wrote what I think is a pretty terrific episode in season 7, we had the luxury of 3 weeks, I think, for that script because it came over the holiday, the Christmas holiday. Human Error. Remember? 7/9.
although, I don't know, she can't fall in love because the chip will kill her.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic episode.
3 weeks, that's pretty good, guys, in the middle of the
It was.
season. You take that Christmas break episode every year, be the guy that volunteers for that one. So was Voyager always slated for like when season 7 came up, was it known to be the last season of Voyager?
I think so. And yeah, I mean, at that point, for whatever reason, 7 seasons was the thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, DS9 and TNG both.
yeah, I think it was well known. That would be the last.
And the idea to then, so does Paramount go, okay, well, obviously, in 7, we're gonna be done with this, we need something else, so get on that.
As Voyager was coming and entering its final season, the studio said, we want another one. Rick Berman begged them to wait because there had just been these 3, and between them,
Yeah.
I don't know how many episodes. It was time to just give the Star Trek TV shows a rest for a couple of years and make people build up an appetite again.
Right.
And they said, well, if you don't do it, someone else will. We'll find someone else, basically. I didn't say those exact words, and I've said this before, we would have liked to have waited a little bit before Enterprise came out. And it did suffer, I think, a lot of extra criticism and scrutiny because it was like, oh, another one. What's different about this one? What makes this worth existing? And I think if we'd waited 2 to 4 years and then come out with another one, it would have benefited the show greatly.
Oh, I agree. I think that's absolutely 100%.
You were trying to protect the brand, and they sort of forced
And
you.
the Golden Goose was ill.
Yeah.
But it was such back then throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s, it was a phenomenon.
Yeah.
The Star Trek was just an absolute. It's great being here, by the way, and seeing all the
uniforms, all the
uniforms.
It's amazing.
And it's like nothing's changed.
It is wild. Like I mean, to me in my brain, like what am I, 40 some odd years old now, the pinnacle of Star Trek was when First Contact was coming out. Like that felt to me like Star Trek was its most powerful it will ever. It was like, oh my God, it's everywhere. It's the #1 movie at the box office. It's like great. There's 2 shows that are on, and I get to go to the movie theater and watch TNG. Like it was like an amazing time. And I think that could only sustain for so long before there's like as we all know, I don't know if you've seen Star Wars lately, but I don't know, take a break. But it's like when you have something so different but the same as Enterprise was, where now I watch Enterprise and I'm like, this show never got a fair crack at anything because it came off the tails of Voyager. I think you're absolutely correct. Like there's some. I was always made to believe like Enterprise is like then there's Enterprise and I'm like okay, but then I watch Enterprise and I'm like Show's pretty fucking good.
Yeah, we're watching it on our podcast, and we've never seen it, and that was the wrap, and there's so much subtlety and ambiguity in the plots, and you know, there's the pace difference that you were referring to, Brannon, but it's, you know, it's totally legitimate. It's not, you know, it doesn't feel like it's slow. It's like, yeah, these scenes are taking more time.
And I thought it looked good. I mean, it had the production values were cool, and it just, I can't blame, you know, the audience at that time. It was a lot of Star Trek. It was, but it's interesting to note how the different generations have their Trek.
Yeah.
And I have, you know, with all these new Star Trek.
Yeah.
There's a whole generation of people, that's their Star Trek, you know?
Yeah, it's wild. Like, there's a generation of people who only know Star Trek from like 2009 forward. And I'm excited for them to discover my
Mike, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have stories that are on this along those lines, but you have a unique sort of perspective. You were an intern or PA originally on the show?
I was an intern.
You were an intern, so it's a unique perspective on a show that I have friends who were started in that position, then became writers. So I'm curious if you have any memories of even just the vibe when you were an intern.
What's the line from Galaxy Quest? I'm just glad to be on the show, man. You know?
Right.
So it was very strange because I did my internship in season 2, told the story, and then I wrote a teleplay in season 3, and then I came back a couple seasons later with some more sales. I felt like I was just kind of like skipping through time with Voyager, which is maybe inappropriate. And when I came on staff with my writing partner at the time, we were only there for like maybe 3/4 of the final season. So I feel like I was a guest there. I mean, we were on staff, but I was also still a fan of the show and just trying to come up with, you know, really fun ideas that would service these characters that I, as a viewer, really, really loved.
Well, I mean, that's probably the most exciting way to become a writer, isn't it? If you're still a fan of the show.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the most popular uniform around here? Is it clear?
That's a good question. What is the most popular
Is it original
uniform?
series? Is it Next Gen? Is it Strange New Worlds? What?
I'm seeing a lot
of it.
I've seen an extraordinary amount of Lower Decks uniforms.
Oh, Lower Decks.
There's some applause there. I think Discovery, it's too hard to make those uniforms, right? And that's why there is a nice mix. Like just in the audience, like right now I'm looking at, I see DS9 era, I see TOS back there, I see a TNG. I see another, there's a Boimler over there. Orville's over here, they got an Orville, look at that. See?
Hello.
Yeah, you touch all of us in many different ways. I haven't seen the First Contact uniform. I saw 2 people in it, and I was like,
Those are great
I
uniforms.
love them. They're my favorite uniform, they're grays. I genuinely. And then when DS9,
The little mock turtleneck.
Oh my
thing,
God.
Very sexy.
that just makes me feel like I could like unzip the jacket and not feel so fat, you know? Like, what's up?
I saw Captain Pike earlier today from the original unaired pilot shot in 1965 or whatever that was.
Did you see the guys dressed as TOS Gilligan and the skipper? Did I hear? No, I would love to read.
I just wanted to return to fluidic space, if I might, for a second. I had a question, I think, for species 8472. I don't know, I'm throwing this open to anybody. To me, they were one of the greatest antagonists in Star Trek history. They were just so terrifying. I thought it was so genius to set them up as, you know, the introduction to them is kicking the Borg's ass, and then it's like, well, how do we do with them? And it seemed like it was a quick shift, and I don't know if it was, I'm curious if it was a budgetary issue, if it was just too much CG to deal with them, into them being in disguise as humans, and I'm curious what that transition was.
Well, they were our first fully computer-generated aliens. First ever on Voyager and any other Trek show. So that in and of itself was like
Just
Back
budget
then,
there.
how many seconds of that could you afford?
Right.
10, 12?
Right.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So that was certainly part of it.
That makes sense.
They were designed really well by a guy named Dan Curry, but you know the CGI is crude. It was, you know, it was relatively new. We weren't Jurassic Park, but we gave it a try, you know. And
did you feel, even from your perspective, because as a viewer at the time, I was like, this is terrifying, and so maybe I just gave it a buy. Were you guys watching it at the time like, we can't pull this off yet?
I think we watched it and thought, this is good enough.
Right.
And it really, there was a Voyager episode on late at night the other night called Prey, which was about a species 8472 loose on Voyager. And I realized watching there were some great shots of the creature like floating in zero G with a flashlight backlighting it, and you realize, oh, that's a great shot. That stands up today.
I agree.
And you realize it's all about how it's lit.
Totally, especially with CG.
And also, all of those shows we've been talking about were airing before high definition television was introduced.
Right.
So
That
they're all shot
helped.
before
The blurriness helped, I think.
We have not a ton of time left, but we have some people lined up to ask questions over here on our left, and I want to get to the hand on our right. I see you over there. Hello, yes. We're gonna start right. I see that. I just changed the whole thing. Hello.
Hi. Question for Brannon. This is about Year of Hell. If it should be turned into a year-long arc, did you have any ideas in mind for story arcs or character arcs that you would love to have, written about for these characters that we love?
He's asking about Year of Hell. If you had anything that you didn't get to do in the two-parter, you had anything in mind for like what if it was a season-long arc, what you would have gotten to do?
Great question.
You know, I don't remember. I don't think we planned that far in advance. If we had done it as a seasonal arc, I think killing off characters would have been on the table, but probably off the table. I don't know. The two-parter, I think it would have had a different ending. As it exists, it's drawn some criticism for having a tidy reset button ending, but in fact, it's the only ending it could have because Janeway wanted to reset time and restore the timeline and restore her ship. So it was the perfect ending. I think it would have unfurled in a more gradual way and probably would have had a less abrupt ending.
Great. All right, thank you. Over here, we're going left.
I was just curious about your reasons and your thoughts for making a romantic relationship between Chakotay and Seven instead of Chakotay and the captain.
Chakotay and Seven. It's basically asking about the decision to make it Chakotay and Seven that get together as opposed to Chakotay and Janeway.
Well, what happened with Chakotay and Janeway?
They sort of
Nothing.
he built her a bathtub on a
planet, and that was it.
And then they sort of were flirting for a little while. To my mind, who knows what you guys were intending, and then it kind of just drifted away.
The only episode I recall is the one Andre mentioned, where she's doing the holodeck, a holographic Chakotay.
Right.
In terms of them having a real relationship.
They are together by the finale.
They were, okay. So that's a season 7 thing.
Well, I think that
Mike, what's the deal?
I wanted Seven to get together with the Doctor, and I even wrote it.
Right. Which also seems to be something that the show is toying with for a while.
That was really the relationship that had a spark, I guess.
Yes.
Totally. I even wrote a scene where he confesses his love to her. It was this show right where he thought he was going to die. Right before the finale.
What does he say?
He says, "I love you, Seven."
Well, maybe that's the reason we didn't make it.
And I don't think that Janeway, being who Janeway is, would ever have a relationship with a person under her command.
Right.
I felt that would have been inappropriate as a
Right.
character.
Yeah, Terry Taylor was very protective of Janeway
Yeah.
that way, and she thought it would have been really inappropriate for her to
Oh, good for her. That's way ahead of the curve for
But it would have been cool
level
with
progressive
It's just
thinking.
a crewman, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Over here.
Hey, good evening. I know that probably one of the hardest things as a writer to do is to close out an entire series, but I was just curious if there were other ideas that you had thrown around for the series finale.
Good question.
Were there other ideas floating around?
The one that I talked the most about is I felt 7 of 9, and I'm glad this didn't happen for all the obvious reasons with Star Trek Picard and everything. But it seemed to me one of the reasons we did this episode of Human Error was to show that this was a character that was a tragic character, was never going to be able to love, never going to be able to be close to another human being. I guess it's kind of like Twilight or something.
Right.
But to me, and I stand completely alone in this, I thought she should have sacrificed her life to save her crew. That 7 of 9, to get them home, she should have made the ultimate sacrifice because she knew she could never go back to the board, she could never be fully human, and it would say so much about how much she really did love the crew.
And how much
I think it would have
her
brought a tear to people's eye. I think it would have been deeply moving. Having said that, I was shut down, just like and she's gone on to the captain.
Yeah, she's the captain of the Enterprise. Whatever.
By the way, Matt and I apologize. We insisted we be next to the hall with the loud jazz saxophone.
Yeah, I always wanted to say I wanted to be like I'm saying goodnight to and thank you to Lord Michaels. That is all the time we have for this panel. Thank you guys so much for being here. I want to thank you guys, Andre and Mike, so much for being here. Thank you guys very much. We'll be doing more panels throughout the weekend. Take a look at those schedules. I'm going to shuffle these guys off the stage. Thank you very much. Shuffly, shuffly, shuffly. I'm under strict shuffle orders. Or shuffle.
Us or them?
They don't want us. We better bring these microphones back. Thank you guys.